thank you so much for agreeing to do this, BenBonk. So for the people that are watching or listening, do you want to just go ahead and tell us like a little bit about who you are and what you do, just assuming that they don't know who you are right now?
Yeah, sure. So my name is BenBonk, and I am an indie game developer, and I've been developing games for around 5-ish years now. And I started off mostly just on small game jam games, but now more recently I've spent the past 3 years or so working on Slime Keep, which is an indie top-down roguelike game
Hmm.
with a very limited color palette. And I also have a YouTube channel where I upload devlogs, just kind of showcasing the progress I make on Slime Keep and any other projects.
Awesome. And I want to add to that. You have a YouTube channel, and you have a YouTube channel that's freaking killing it, dude. Like your your YouTube
Thank you.
channel is like wildly successful. It's really cool, and I've got questions for you about that, but we'll get into that soon enough. So first off, I just want to ask you about Slime Keep because it's such an interesting project. As you said, you've been working on it for a while now, and it started off as a game jam, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did it go from, you're working on this game jam game, and obviously you must have really liked it. So just tell me a little bit about how it got to game jam to where it is now. Just a little bit about the journey from start to finish to where it is right now.
Yeah, so that is a pretty crazy story that I frankly don't even know how I've gotten here. But essentially, so it was Ludum Dare 46. And I made my game, I released it, and it got pretty good reviews. Like, or not pretty good. I mean, people seem to like the game, but they also had some feedback for it. And
Yep.
so before that, I made a devlog, just kind of doing that. And the devlog did really, really well. I mean, I was surprised. I mean, at that time, I was still uploading devlogs, but my channel really hadn't picked up any steam at all. And then I uploaded this video, and then first week or so, I mean, it got a few thousand views, and I was just kind of blown away. And
That's awesome.
so I didn't have any plans to make it into a big game, but it was kind of a combination. So I mean, this people seem to really like the devlog, and so I was like, okay, that's cool. Maybe people I should keep on working on this. So, and then I also had a bunch of feedback from the Lunum Dare feedback, I guess, game page where people left comments being like, I think you should add this. So it started off just me doing like small tweaks to the game. I wasn't planning on actually making to like a full roguelike release, but then I just got these pieces of feedback, and I was like, well, let me try to work on this a bit more. And then eventually people were kind of suggesting that I should turn into a big commercial game. And so I actually had a Discord server, and I tell this, which I think is kind of hilarious. The only reason that the game is a roguelike is because sometime a few weeks into the development of the game, I just asked people on my Discord server that had like 30 people in it at the time,
Yep.
and I just said, what do you guys think I should do with this? And a bunch of people in there, I guess, liked roguelikes, and they said I should make a roguelike. So I just kind of went with that, and it doesn't sound like a great start for making a game because I kind of I didn't even really know what a roguelike was at this point, but I was just kind of from that point on like, I'm going to turn this game into a roguelike, and it kind of just went from there.
That's so cool. And you just gave me the perfect segue into like what my next question is, because your Slime Keep is such an interesting like game in the way that you're handling the development, because it really does seem like it's a super like community driven game, right? Where you're very active with your Discord server and getting people involved in the development process. And I just think that that's a really unique idea. Yeah. So you already told me like kind of how that came to be. You just kind of started asking people questions. It started with feedback off of Ludum Dare, and then you went to Discord and you were just asking people questions. So in terms of this whole, because I know I've seen in your devlogs that like some people, you'll be like, oh, does anybody want, I think one particular one I remember was, does anyone want to make me a shopkeeper kind of thing? And someone drew
Yeah.
something and submitted it to you, right? Like that's super unique. I think that's really cool. So just like, has the whole, just for people again that don't know the game too well, has the whole thing been kind of like that, where it's very, very community driven? And what's that been like, and just how's it going for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely just since the start of the game's development, I mean, it's always had that community emphasis, I'd say, just because it literally started, the whole game's development started because of community feedback.
Yep.
And so it's always been, I mean, I don't know, I always kind of think of this, I mean, I could not do or continue to develop Slimekeep without the community. I mean, it's not just feedback. I mean, I obviously there's tons of that that's super helpful on whether it be Discord or YouTube or whatever,
Yep.
but also art and code and that sort of stuff. I mean, especially in the earlier days, I really wasn't the best programmer. I mean, I really didn't. I mean, I knew how to make games, but really not well at all.
Right.
And so there's a few people I remember who, I mean, still to this day, the basis for the weapons inventory system and the upgrade system was all just kind of through people helping me with that code, which I mean, I'm super grateful for. So that was really nice. And then,
That's
yeah,
so
we
cool.
definitely have had people just who have like a passion for the game. And so they might kind of make concepts for whole entire bosses, which I mean, I am a pixel artist. So sort of, I mean, I'm definitely not as good as a lot of people in my Discord server. So I usually can sort of make stuff, but then, you know, if people want to contribute to the game, I definitely, it's super helpful. I mean, speed things up for me, and it's really cool to kind of be able to use ideas and art pieces and that kind of stuff inside of the game.
Yeah, because everybody gets to feel like they're special and like they're like a part of this game that you're creating, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really cool. Have there been any like unexpected challenges that have come up because of any of this? Like, does anyone ever give you like anyone that you speak to a lot on your Discord server that gives you an idea that maybe you don't really like or don't want to implement, and like any hurt feelings or just any kind of challenges that have arisen because of this community driven development process?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I guess I can think of a few points. Like first, I mean, there's always that kind of pressure to continually deliver. I mean, you always want to keep on working on the game and
Yep.
kind of continuing updating people just to let you know like how this is going. So that's I guess kind of one pressure, but more importantly, as you kind of mentioned, I can't listen to every single piece of feedback in the game. That's something that I really had to get used to because just the nature of the game's development, there's so much feedback. I mean, again, in Discord and YouTube and that kind of stuff, there's just I've gotten so many suggestions from people, and so I've had to really kind of focus on what I think is best for the game, and
Yep.
because I want to listen to people's feedback. At the end of the day, they're trying to help improve the game, but I can't just go and add a whole entire new system to the game. I mean, I have to make sure to manage the game's scope, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then also there's ideas that I mean I think are cool, but it's just they're I don't think they were really right for Slime Keep, and so I kind of have to get good at saying like no to people and be like, you know, I really appreciate that. That also goes with art. And someone might spend, you know, hours making this piece of art, and then I
Right.
kind of have to be like, I really appreciate it, but I don't think you know it's right for the game. So that's always kind of tough,
I
but
bet. Yeah.
it's a challenge. And I guess, and then finally, I mean, legal wise, you need to make sure to get permission from everyone. I mean, I've had to like talk to lawyers and stuff to make sure what I can do. And then for music people, get contracts just so there's no going to be any legal nightmares, hopefully.
I was wondering about that. That was always something that was in the back of my mind. It's like, I wonder if this is something that could end up like biting him in the ass later on. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
it sounds like you got yourself covered. That's fantastic.
I think I do. I think I've done stuff, hopefully, but don't quote me when I get sued in, you know, a year from now. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
All right. You know, this is going to sound weird, but it made me really happy to hear that, like, just to hear someone like yourself admit that, you know, you weren't, especially in the beginning stages, you weren't the best programmer. You know, you might not have been able to know how to do every single thing that you wanted to do, because I can certainly relate to that. Again, especially a little ways back, towards the beginning of my journey as well. But I'm just curious, because it can be really validating for people to hear. Like, have you ever had an idea for a Slime Keep? And I know you already mentioned you've gotten help with like the weapons inventory system and things like that. But if there's anything else that you really wanted to implement into Slime Keep, but you just like technically, from the programming perspective, you had no idea how to implement it, or even from an art perspective, you're like, I've got an idea for this really cool thing, and you try it, and maybe you just can't get it working the way that you want. Has there ever been anything like that where you really want this X thing in your game, but you just couldn't get it working the way that you wanted, and you kind of had to drop it?
Nothing comes directly to mind. I mean, because most of the time, if there's something that I think is really complicated and it's to the point where I can't currently program it, then it's usually outside of the game scope. And I kind of just have to recognize, like, hey, it's just me working on this project. I can't have the system might sound really cool, but I kind of just have to keep things, in scope. But I guess going back to like that inventory system, I mean, back or like weapons inventory system and upgrades. I mean, that was yeah. I done Unity for a bit before that, but I really had no clue how to program. Like I didn't know how to structure things. That was my main problem, and I
Yep.
didn't know. I kind of knew how to program for Unity. I didn't actually know. I learned Unity before I learned C sharp, so I can still remember. I mean, I didn't know what a class even meant. Like that's going to sound ridiculous, and I didn't. I remember learning because in the upgrade system, how it kind of works is you have a bunch of method that's kind of like, a public string get description and like returns the description. And I remember I didn't know that functions could have return types because all I did at that time was, void and
Void.
stuff. And
Yep.
and so I was like, oh my gosh, I did not know that you could do that. So yeah, I really didn't know that kind of stuff. But I think I've gotten at this to the point now. Most of the stuff I feel like I've gotten quite a bit better at programming. I'm
Yep.
still not great. I mean, I still might write not clean code, but in general, at this point, if there's something that I kind of need to implement, usually I can figure out myself or just by searching up, enough stuff or just trying and stuff. So I think I've gotten to that point, which is kind of nice where if I want something, I can usually figure it out myself. But I mean, I'd still be open to asking my community, if I get stuck at any point.
Yep. Well, you're in a really good spot then, because yeah, it's and it's, I'm sure it's nice for everyone to hear where it's and you know what? I can totally relate, not knowing what a class was, not knowing that you could have functions that had a return type. I was like, I thought they were all void. What the heck is like
Yeah.
this thing with what's this return keyword mean? It's just, oh man. I dove into things head first, and it sounds like you kind of did the same, where it's like, wow. But you kind of, it's one of those situations probably for you as well, where you jump out of the airplane and you just grow wings on the way down to the ground, right? You just learn as you go.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of came into Slime Keep, I guess, kind of at the height. I mean, I thought I was before that. I'd released another game. It was called Nelson Island. It's still on my itch.io page if you want to play it. But I mean, that code was terrible. But I kind of thought that I was like, man, at this point, I can get anything done. I can, program anything. And then I kind of got into Slime Keep, and it definitely humbled me at the beginning, but
Yep.
for the better.
That's awesome. So this is always a question that I'm interested in asking, like every single developer, right? Because there's always stories behind the development of every single game. So if there's anything that you can think of, tell me a little bit about like your highest point in the development of Slime Keep, as well as your lowest point. And what I mean by highest point could be like something that you're just, whatever it is for you, your biggest accomplishment, the thing that you're the most proud of, some sort of system you made that saved you a bunch of time. And lowest moment obviously being like maybe you had to scrap a whole bunch of functionality or a whole bunch of levels or anything like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I was thinking about this. For my highest moment, it was kind of hard to think about, but I mean, I really just come back to, I mean, my first kind of devlog releasing and just like that whole entire initial wave of support after releasing the first Game Jam devlog that started everything. I know it's a bit more like YouTube specific, but still, I just think that's kind of like what kicked it off. And I mean, and just overall, the fact that I've been so consistent working on Slime Keep, that's just something I guess I'm pretty proud about, and just been able to work on the project for so long, because I obviously did not intend to work on that. So, I mean, even though that's not anything too specific, I'd say that's, I mean, probably my highest point. There's no specific mechanic or feature that I can really think of.
Yep.
But for lowest point, I can think of two things. One of them is this is actually what I'm going to be covering in my next devlog, coming out like late, I don't know, 2 weeks from now or so.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but I essentially spent, so long on this. I can't believe that this was probably one of the lowest points of game development for me, but on a rich text option for Slime Keep, which is essentially just like a checkbox in the settings menu that you can check it, and it kind of converts all the text in the game to a more high resolution font, because some people complain that the old font was too kind of low resolution and hard to read. So
Gotcha.
I wanted to like make sure people could read it. And that was a whole entire journey, because I didn't really know what I was doing. It's kind of, the whole video is kind of embarrassing, but I just felt like I needed to kind of make a video about sharing and be like, man, this is not all pretty. So it's very, my next vlog is very different, but essentially it's kind of like I used some methods that would permanently break stuff, and then
Oh no.
I would have to go in and manually fix it. And then I couldn't figure out like GitHub, and I was having, it was just a complete mess. And I was just, for some of the days, I was just hacking away at it. It was just definitely some of my lowest points that I can think of. And then also, I guess another one, but more recent, I guess, is the first time I released a closed beta to my playtesters.
Okay.
And I was hoping that'd be a high point, because it's like, man, finally got something done. But within an hour, we had like 100 bug reports. Just people were breaking the game so much. Like,
Oh
I
my
didn't,
God.
I knew there were bugs. Like, I knew there was some stuff, but there was just so much stuff. It was so overwhelming just to see like the Discord channels fill up with like error messages and why is like the most crazy glitches possible. So
Oh man.
that was pretty tough, at least initially.
So
But yeah.
I gotta like just get some more clarity on the low point that you just finished sharing about, because that I think that's a fear point for a lot of people, right? It's like that's one of the reasons that I think anyways that a lot of people delay getting feedback or wait to get feedback until a little bit too late, because it's like, oh, I'm afraid of getting bug reports, I'm afraid of getting, well, critical remarks and bad feedback and all of that stuff too. But that's one of the things, right? Is like, oh my God, like, and you get this 100 different bugs. That's crazy. Like, so was that like a huge demotivating thing for you? Like, just how like on a personal emotional level, like how did you end up kind of working through that and just manage to turn it around and just keep on plowing through?
Yeah, it definitely was tough initially. I was just definitely stressed out for a day or two, because I was like, man, I don't know if, this is going to take forever. But I just kind of had to, I guess, push through and just know like I just want to patch up all these loose ends before. It felt like a lot, but in reality, I guess I also kind of overestimated some of like the bug encounters, because sometimes some people would do certain things and so they get like an error message and stuff, but a lot of times it was kind of, it would look different, I guess, but it was kind of solid. I'm sorry. So basically, like the things would look like there's some like mechanic, there's some system that was just not working properly,
Yep.
and it would kind of break a bunch of stuff, and then I would see all this stuff broken. I'm like, man, there's like all this different stuff broken, but in reality it was just this like one thing
Gotcha.
that caused a bunch of errors. So a lot of the times, a lot of the bug reports I got, I guess it wasn't as stressful just for me knowing, because I fixed this one thing, and then that kind of alleviated some of the other issues down the line. And a lot of the issues, while some of them were, I guess, tough to figure out, it wasn't as bad as I guess I thought it was, as bad as I thought it was. But yeah, I guess that's why it's so important to, I definitely think I did wait quite a while to playtest Slime Keep. And I think it is really important to playtest early and
Right.
often.
Yep. Gotcha. So I I just want to shift to ask about the art style of Slime Keep because, and I don't even mean this as a criticism at all. You just you use a very limited color palette, as you said, right? Like it's I think a monochrome game, is I think the proper term for it. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but
I think monochrome might be two colors, but I could be wrong also. I'm not sure, but yeah, go ahead.
fair enough. So, it just how have you found working with kind of this limited color palette where like most of the game is like different shades of green, right? Like I'm just curious,
Yeah.
what's the thought process there? Does that make it easier for you? Does it actually make it harder? Just kind of because it's so limiting, right? I'm just super curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess starting off, before I even chose something in the palette, I guess I always just kind of liked the looks of limited color palettes, just anywhere from 4 to 8 colors, I guess.
Yep.
And so I kind of just went with that for Slime Keep just inherently because I was like, this is something easy. And art wise, I mean, it definitely makes the art so much easier because I don't have to worry about all these different colors for things and worry about kind of getting right colors here. I mean, it's really just there's 4 colors. So you have a dark blue, which is for outlines. You have a regular green, which is like kind of the fill color. And then you have 2 shading colors, like a dark and a light one. And so you can kind of just make everything with just those 4 simple colors. I mean, and so it really does make things a lot easier. I mean, I don't have to worry about, it's just one palette that I can stick to. And so prototyping stuff is way easier. If people want to make their own art to share it to the game, it's also way easier for them.
That's
so
true.
it's just one palette and it's, each color has a purpose. So it definitely makes things considerably easier. But I guess with that, there's some drawbacks. Not everyone is a huge fan. The game is very, very green. I will admit that. So
It works well
yeah,
though, right? Slime, right? You think slime,
yeah,
you think green. So, um, now I'm always curious as a viewer of someone who has a really like thriving YouTube channel. I'm always curious whether those people have full-time jobs outside of their YouTube or if YouTube and game dev is just your full-time gig. So what's your story there?
yeah. So this is kind of interesting. I don't really say this too much publicly, but I'll say it here. So this might surprise some people, but or maybe not. I don't know. I'm actually still, well, just about to graduate high school. So I started, believe it or not, Slime Keep when I was 15, just in my freshman year
Wow.
of high school. So now I'm 18, just about to graduate and like go to college. And so, just because of that, so it might be kind of surprising for some people. I don't know, because I don't know. I don't think I sound too old, but yeah, I don't. I guess just due to that, I don't have the pressure for it to succeed financially or anything. But as I said, I do kind of have the goal to finish it before college because I obviously don't want to. That's coming up soon for me, and I don't want to have the pressures of finishing Slime Keep before or during college. So that's kind of a self-imposed goal to finish Slime Keep by the end of the year, just so I can get that done. But yeah, overall, I mean, it feels like a hobby to me, but a very like dedicated hobby. I mean, I work on the project pretty much all the time.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's that's so cool because like I'm in my mid 30s and like you're one of the
Yeah.
people that I look up to, right? And it's always so strange to hear that like someone that you look up to ends up being like half your age, but that's one of the really cool things about game development is like there's people of all different age groups that come in and it doesn't really matter what age you are. If you work at it long enough, you become really, really good at what you do, right?
Mhm.
And I just find that to be really, really interesting. So, um, and I can cut this if you don't want to answer, that's totally cool. But I'm just curious. So is game development, you said you're going to college. Is game
Yeah.
development like, do you have aspirations of making game development a full-time gig for you? Or are you going to college for something completely unrelated?
Yeah, so my plan is I'm most likely going to study computer science just because, I mean, I do programming all the time. That's kind
Yep.
of like what I do. But I'm right now, I'm probably not planning to do game development as a career just because, I mean, I like it as a hobby and I love making kind of small indie games, but I'm not too sure about kind of having to work especially in a kind of triple A office. I don't think that sounds too appealing to me. I mean, maybe if there's an indie company at some point, but I would say most likely just study computer science, see what I would do from there. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily my plan right now, but I mean that could change. We'll see.
Okay. So I don't know if you know this because some of the indie developers that I has spoken to actually are not sure. So maybe you don't know. But I went to Steam and you can look at top wish listed games and then you can filter by indie games. And Slimekeep is on that list. I don't know if were you aware of that?
Well, when you sent me this question actually beforehand,
Oh,
I briefly like did take a look, and I was kind of surprised by that also. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know, like I would have to like import it into a spreadsheet or something to actually count it because I don't know how many are on there. My guess is like it was a pretty big list. I'm guessing like 200, 250, something like that. And but it was on that list. So what is your advice for other developers that want to get their game on a top list, right? Because that's a dream for so many people.
Yeah, I mean, really, that just comes from YouTube. And so, I mean, I guess in YouTube, I try to do obviously as many call to actions. I try to just do one per video if I can remember.
Yep.
And so that obviously helps. But otherwise, I mean, definitely just marketing early and often, if you can, is probably the biggest way to just build, I guess, hype for your game. I mean, make sure to make the Steam page really, really early. I made the Steam page back when the game was still not even really developed, but then that just helped me accumulate wish lists right off the bat. So I mean, if you're starting a project, definitely make Steam page early. And I guess just try to market yourself early. I mean, hopefully getting on some social platforms or something. I mean, that obviously helps, or just do something to get it out there. Whatever, however you might want to do that.
Yep, that makes sense. And that's validating for me to hear because the shorter project game that I'm working on right now, we actually created the Steam page like literally before I had even opened, hit the new project button in Unity. We already had a whole Steam page set up because I was like, we had a pretty good idea for what the game was going to be. So my wife slapped together some art real quick and we threw up a Steam page. And now the Steam page is in desperate need of like an update because the game and what we have on the Steam page is totally different. But yeah, so that's good for me to hear because it's like, yeah, have a Steam page up, have it up early, and start getting those wish lists as fast as possible. That's awesome. So thank you for that. Um, so you know, I consider game development to be like a form of art, right? And even programming, me personally, I consider that to be kind of a science, but also an art form. And whenever you're putting art out there, it's a really, really scary thing, right? Like marketing a game that you made, it's scary because you know that there's going to be probably some negative feedback. There's going to be a lot of people that may or may not like it. And art is subjective, right? Some people are going to like it and some people are not going to like it. You've been doing this very, 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 very publicly on YouTube and on Discord, and I'm sure on other social media platforms that I don't even know about, for quite a while, right? So, just you personally, did you have any fears, like about putting yourself and your creations out there on the internet for the world to see? And is there anything that you needed to do to kind of get over those fears? Like, just what would you have to tell people about related, excuse me, regarding fear about putting your stuff out there for the internet to see?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, for me, I didn't have that much of a fear, I guess, initially, because I've been doing YouTube and just putting stuff out there for so long now that it was kind of natural for me. But in regards to my actual video creation, I just try to, I guess, keep things honest with me, my audience. I don't really want to kind of make game development seem, way easier than it is or hide the realities most cases. I mean, it's
Yep.
kind of a balancing act. 'Cause you want to make it entertaining, but also show the reality behind game development. So if I struggle with something, I want to make sure to show it. And that kind of goes with my latest video. I mean, that video is pretty much all just like, oh, very bad. But yeah, I mean, naturally, just getting your work out there will get you people who don't like it. And you just have to realize that you can't please everyone, and you just have to try your best to continue to work at something. Like there's always going to be people who just don't like your game or whatever it is. I mean, you could make the best roguelike game or be working on something really cool, but there's always going to be people who, don't like roguelikes or don't like, for me, my green art style. I mean, trust me, I have seen hundreds upon hundreds of comments of people saying like your game is so ugly and why is it all green? And I just have to be like, well, yeah, I guess so. But there's also, you have to remind yourself there's always also people who really like the art style, and so yeah, that definitely helps. And just I guess in natural or just in general, having trying to like manage your ego and just acknowledge the realities of game dev. For me, that's kind of just being like, I'm not the best, I guess, game dev out there, programmer out there, but I'm still like just trying to work on something and stay dedicated to it. So I don't want to kind of, I just want to manage my perception and not come across as something that I'm not.
Yep. Cool, man. Well, that's it sounds like you're, in a really, really healthy mindset. So it like, and I gotta ask, like, because regarding having such a successful YouTube channel, like the number of views you get is really consistent. I apologize. I actually can't remember how many subscribers you have, but I know it's like a really, really solid amount. Um, do you know what your subscriber
Yeah,
count is?
72, 71,000, something around
There
that.
you go. Like, right, you're approaching the six figures pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people view you as someone that has, quote unquote made it on YouTube, right? Like you're getting the views. You've got a game that is on the top wish listed games on Steam, right?
Yeah.
So do you ever struggle with just like feeling like struggling with imposter syndrome or feelings of insecurity, or like you're a fraud, or like somehow you lucked out, just like you're like in this space where you don't feel like you belong? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, well, the start of Slime Keep was, just basically me getting lucky with the YouTube algorithm, I guess. But I mean, really, just going back to the last question, kind of acknowledging my faults and just trying to remain, I guess, humble. I guess really does, I guess, help with that. And I always know that there's going to be people that are, technically better than me, and sometimes I feel like I see people on YouTube and stuff, and they have like really really good editing and all this game dev stuff, and I'm like, man, they're really good. And I sometimes I'm like, man, I have a lot more subscribers than them, but I feel like what they're doing is really really good. And so that sometimes I feel almost like, man, I mean, it feels kind of weird just having that. But I also just try to remind myself that I'm been very dedicated to this for 3 years, and I mean, I think that shows a lot to.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of one of my things that reassures me, I guess, in that process. But I mean, I definitely do get, I guess, jealous of other people. I'm like, man, there's so many new devlogs and projects more than ever recently. I mean, people release stuff all the time, and
Yep.
even I guess one experience I can think of. I mean, there was a devlog I made. It was before I made the Slime King devlog, or like the final devlog, final boss devlog
Yep.
in my game. And I remember that devlog got. I mean, this is going to sound kind of bad because it got around like 15,000 views within the first 2 weeks or so, which is, I mean, still really good. And I obviously, but it was definitely a bit lower than, or or it might have been 12,000 actually. But it was definitely lower than my average. And I was kind
Yep.
of like thinking, doubting myself. I was like, man, has Slime Keep, have the devlogs kind of run, have the ran its course, and is it going to recover? People's not interested anymore. And then I just guess I was reassured because my next video was one of my most popular devlogs, and I was like, oh my gosh. And even my last video that I released, I mean, it still did well, but slightly under average. But I just have to remind myself, try not to get too tied up with the numbers, and just keep on trying to make the best, devlogs I can. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that was kind of off topic, but
No, that's good. Like, so it sounds like, and this is really interesting because it sounds like you never really seem to, and I don't mean you specifically, just like anyone that's doing what you do, it sounds like it's almost impossible to reach a place where you feel completely secure in what you've gained, right? So it's like you have this great channel, you get all these views, but you upload one video that kind of doesn't perform as well as your average, right? And all of a sudden all these doubts start creeping in and whatnot. So it's just, I find it really interesting to hear that even someone that's been doing this as long as you, it can still like, it can be and I don't mean this like in any bad way, but just like it can take something as small as like one video not performing that well, where you're like, oh man, like are people losing interest in my game? And I can see how you would spiral down from there, right? So
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because I mean, I feel like that sounds bad because it's like, man, I didn't get 30,000 views. I only got 15,000 views when I wanted 30,000. It's like I'm already very fortunate to get that many views in the first place. But then, just relative to other stuff, I guess it kind of, yeah, it does make you doubt things a
yeah,
bit. But
because you end up you get, and like my views are nowhere near what yours are, but you do end up seeing this kind of average number that you're used to seeing, and you can just tell within the first like day. It's like, oh, this is doing really well, or oh, it's not doing so well. And when it's not doing so well, even though there's so many factors, it can be a little bit hard to not take it kind of personally, right? Or be like, did I like, maybe I did something like bad in this video, or maybe I wasn't as funny as I thought I was, or whatever. Is that kind of what it is for you too?
yeah, I mean, for that last video, I mean, I thought it was, I thought the thumbnail and title were pretty good. It was about adding a shopkeeper. And, I've kind of done stuff similar to that in the past. And so I thought it would do, kind of similar. But just this time, it didn't do as well. Or there's just just slightly worse. And so I was kind of, yeah, I was definitely confused. I was like, man, I wonder if it's maybe like the editing or something in the video wasn't as engaging, or because I'm also kind of at the point in Slime Keep where a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, is, I guess, a bit more non-interesting stuff. I mean, so I kind of have been doing a lot of bug fixing or just like tiny tweaking, and I don't think that's usually as interesting as like making a whole new boss for the game or something.
Right.
And so that's also kind of been a factor, I guess, that I've been trying to think about.
Gotcha. So you kind of delved into this a little bit already, but I'm just looking for more clarity on relating to negative feedback or negative comments, or even things about you like personally, because when you're online you can get anything from like, oh, your game is ugly, to like comments about your voice or comments about your personality. You can get like kind of like these hurtful comments at times. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with negative feedback on your game, or negative comments just in general? Just how do you kind of deal with it? Because for myself personally, I've kind of gone back and forth, where I've gone through periods where I kind of needed to step away from the comments section of some of my social media platforms, because I can find myself in a space where like they're just sucking energy right out of me. Like
Yeah.
and 99 out of 100 comments are almost always really, really good, right? And that seems to be the way it is for most people that I've spoken to, and I assume it's the same for you. It's like,
And
but
you just that one comment
that one
you're just
comment.
like, uh, yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, I remember the one comment that it sticks out to me. And I remember some guy like commented, it was just like, this guy sounds like a fish or something. And I was like, what? And then I just like pinned that comic because I thought it was funny. And that was just one example. But in general, I guess there's kind of two types of feedback, because I mean, I usually get a lot of feedback, and I try to read a lot of my comments just naturally because the game is so community driven.
Right.
But there's people who are usually trying to help, and people who aren't. And so even though it kind of depends on tone, I guess, in some points, but for the people who are trying to help, I guess, they might just be like, oh, I think this game doesn't, or I think I might work on a system in a game or something, or a boss, let's say. And then they're like, oh, I just don't think this boss looks that good, or it doesn't, or, some attack with it looks really like unengaging. And so for those ones, you kind of have to like bite the bullet and kind of, think back, like, is this something that I need to work on? And it can be frustrating to have to scrap or change something based on this feedback that you just, spend so much time working on something and then change it. But you kind of have to think, oftentimes they want what's best for your game and are just trying to provide feedback. But then, I mean, on the other case, some people just aren't going to like your game, or aren't even going to like you as a person, or just for any whatever reason, and they might just not be trying to help. And I mean, that's fine. As I said, you could make the best roguelike or make the best whatever, and there's always going to be people who don't like roguelikes. And so you kind of have to, especially with me, I definitely have people who watch my devlogs who aren't big indie gaming people, or roguelikes, who just trinkle in, every now and then, and they might just come and just be really confused. And so you kind of, I mean, not reject them, but I guess, just understand that maybe this isn't for them, and that's perfectly fine.
Right. Right. Okay. That's I actually wrote that down. They want what's best for your game. I wrote that down and I underlined it because that's a good thing, like, for me to take away. Like, I'm kind of, I'm wanting to help people that are listening to this, but I'm also being a little bit selfish, and I'm wanting to, like, take all the best advice from all the best people that are doing what you do and take some of the advice away, right? So yeah, a lot of people that are, it is one of those things where it can be really frustrating. It's like, oh my God, I spent, like, dozens of hours on this thing, and people just kind of crap all over it. But ultimately, at least a lot of the time, obviously there's trolls out there and whatnot, but a lot of the time I do think I agree with you, where people want what's best for your game. They want to help you, even if it's, sometimes unprompted feedback or advice that you didn't ask for, but it's the comment section on an internet video, so what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, just adding one thing, it's like I think tone is also really important, or just kind of speech, because I mean I've gotten so much feedback in my times that some people, I think it's, if you're trying to provide feedback to someone, it's always nice when someone is like, they might say, oh, I think you did this well, but then this thing could use work, or kind of use like a compliment sandwich, or at least if they have some feedback, kind of put in a way that is like that you can take, and it obviously shows that they want what's best for the game. But then sometimes you'll just get people who, like, they just kind of are trashing you, and even though they might be trying to help you, sort of, I mean, you kind of they have like a very negative tone, and so you kind of just have to watch out for that, I guess.
Gotcha. So I'm curious because again, I'm always just curious to know what other developers, like, what they've thought about doing throughout the development process, especially obviously indie developers, right? So because publishers are always a route that people can take. Doing a Kickstarter is always a route that indie developers can take. Releasing your game as early access, that's another route that people can take. So just any of those options. Did you ever at any point in development of Slimekeep consider doing a Kickstarter, or working with a publisher, or releasing your game as early access? And just kind of why or why not? Like, what was kind of your thought process of rejecting those ideas when you decided to not do them?
Yeah, so I mean, for me personally, it's just me on the game. It's really, I mean, I obviously have my community, but it's just me. And so, just in terms of a publisher and a Kickstarter, I really didn't want to add even more pressure onto me just by having to deliver to actual people, or a publisher. So I definitely didn't want that sort of pressure. But then going like Kickstarter wise, I mean, I didn't really need the money, to be honest. I mean, the cost on the game are relatively low, and it's just me. So I really didn't need it from that sense. And then publisher-wise, there's like a few reasons. I mean, obviously, I mean, some of the things that publishers do that I can think of is they provide funding, and I, again, really didn't need funding. And then another thing they do is, help with marketing. And while, I mean, I always want to make sure to market the game other than just YouTube, I think a lot of my marketing does come from YouTube. And so that's, kind of a big leg up. So I don't really think I would get as much value from them as other people, because I already have such an established YouTube channel and devlog series.
Gotcha.
And then also, I mean, I've heard some negative experiences from other indie games or indie game developers who've worked with publishers. And so I think you kind of just have to be careful navigating those, and make sure you get a good developer, get a good publisher with good intentions.
Gotcha. Yep. I've heard some horror stories for sure. And I know that one piece of advice that I heard from, I think, Thomas Brush was, if you ever do decide to work with a publisher and they send you a contract, make sure you hire a lawyer to look over that contract to make sure that, all your ducks in a row, and that you're not going to get screwed in any kind of way. Because sometimes, and I'm sure most publishers are not like this, right? But there's the handful of bad eggs out there that'll try and sneak something in that can take things away from you, right? So that's something that's always stuck with me as well. So according to Steam, your game is set to release in 2023, and I'm just getting that off the Steam page directly. I don't know. Does that sound about right?
That's the plan.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Gotcha. So if all goes according to plan, like, what are your plans for Slimekeep, or just in general post launch. What does the future of your YouTube channel look like? I know you said you're going to college. That was news to me when I sent you these questions. So do you have any plans for future games? Just what does that look like for you after Slime Keep has been released?
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, I mean, I'll be in college, so that's definitely going to be a pretty big time sink. I obviously don't want to do anything too, big, especially because I want to make sure to actually be able to focus on college in that sort of sense. But I'd say if the game does well, I'd definitely consider updating it, possibly with a few small updates to add some more content. But I mean, nothing too major. And I guess I definitely don't have any big plans to start another big project for at least a while. I definitely have ideas for games. I mean, I have a whole entire Google Docs just filled with game ideas that I sometimes think of. And I think it'd really cool just to try different genres and stuff. So, yeah, in the future, I'd say if I worked on another big project, it probably wouldn't be anything like Slime Keep. I mean, might not even be pixel art, definitely not another green game, might
Right.
be something completely different. And then I also might focus a bit more in my time on just YouTube and see how that goes. I mean, I have a few ideas just making smaller games and kind of making just smaller videos, kind of like game jam stuff or challenge stuff, just to see how that goes. And it kind of takes off the pressure of working on such a huge project. But I'll see when the time comes, I guess. But
Cool.
yep.
Cool. So this is something that I'm always, I think a lot of people will be really interested to hear, because you're clearly a guy, and I'm even more impressed now that I know that you're such a young guy, right? Like you're
Yeah.
you're clearly someone that has a lot of grit, right? Like, because making a game and working on a game for years, and outside of school hours and all that stuff, that takes, so you're at school all day and then you come home and then you work on your game, and I can imagine it's just a whole lot. It's a lot of work, right? So you're a person
Yeah.
that has a lot of perseverance. You're a person that has grit. You know how to sit down and get things done, right? So what keeps you motivated? Is there anything, and particularly on days that are like really hard, where it's like, oh my God, I don't want to go to my computer and work on the game, like where you just don't freaking feel like it, but there's always that pressure that you got to perform. You've got the YouTube channel, you've got your community. So what do you do when you're feeling low on motivation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because sometimes, I mean, I don't even fully know myself. I mean, because I wasn't planning on working 3 years on a game, and I'm surprised I even made it this far. But I would think that the community is probably a big part, just because, I mean, obviously I have them to, kind of show stuff, which is really, really motivating all the time. But also, I guess I'm kind of just a workaholic, I guess. I mean, not in the most sense, but I kind of always just, I'd say I'm very motivated in my stuff. I just, if I have something that I need to get done, I think I'm pretty good at just getting it done or getting out of the way. And I guess also just Slime Keep, it's been such a big project. And I mean, while I love what I do, it's kind of been, I don't know how to say this without sounding super bad, but I mean, I don't know if the word's like weighing me down. I don't, that sounds really bad, but I mean, I like what I do, but I would say that it's kind of like this big pressure on myself, and I'm really just looking forward to getting it out there just so I can, start new projects and do different things and not have this
Yep.
weight of Slime Keep, So every day I kind of just, continue to work on the game, just knowing like, it'll be done and I can just be rest easy um, once I get the game out there. But yeah, I just guess the desire, I also have this time, or I have this goal of finishing it before before the end of the year, which definitely is probably a motivator. I mean, just trying to get it out so I don't have to worry about it while I'm in college and stuff. That's also something that motivates me. It's kind of scary to actually, because I don't usually, I'm not used to having the time pressure, but now I kind of feel like, man, I got to get this done. So that's a motivator. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I guess just that in general is mostly it.
So you use the word workaholic, and I find that really interesting. So because that reminds me of myself a little bit. So are you maybe a little bit more like me, where the problem isn't always so much forcing yourself to sit down and work? Do you ever have a problem of like turning it off and being able to like have a life outside of school and outside of game development?
I mean, generally, I would say no. I think I have a pretty good balance. I mean, I make sure while I'm very dedicated to what I do. I mean, I make sure like just, to take breaks. I think that's probably the most important part. And just I never try to put slime keep in front of other things. So if my friends are like, "Do you want to do something?" I'm not like, "Oh, like I don't think I've ever been like, no, I got to work on slime keep." I just try to you know I make sure to work on it when I can, but not make it too important. But
Gotcha.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
So you got a really good balance going out then. But that's like, so you're treating it, and you said this is like a hobby project for you. So it sounds like you're really treating it like a hobby, which sounds like a really healthy place to be in. So that's fantastic. Um,
Yeah, and I think it's also important. I just want to say, like, I've also found just recently, I mean, how important it is to take breaks. I mean, like, I guess there's two kinds of breaks that I kind of think about is short term and long term. And like
yep.
on the short term, I mean more just on like a day basis. So like while I'm working, I mean, as I've discovered, I think this is one of the most interesting things I've discovered as while working on Slime Keep is that you really need to take breaks like during the day. I mean, even if it's just for 15 minutes to take a walk,
Yep.
that is like really, really important because I mean, I found myself that if I could work, 12 hours or something, but a lot of the work, I mean, really just isn't work. I mean, sometimes I'll get distracted, pull up a YouTube video on my second monitor, or just my brain it just turns into mush. Like I can work maybe for an hour or two very productively, and then after that, I just hit a point where I'm like not really making any project progress. So I have to kind of make sure to take those small breaks, which I find really, really important. And then also just in the long term, I mean, I obviously, I mean, I guess, I mean, it's still work, but I guess a break from Slime Keep is editing the dev logs. I kind of use that as a break. I mean, it is still work, but it's not development on Slime Keep. So
Yeah.
that's kind of nice how you can just spend a few days working on the dev log. Like, so once just recently, I got kind of tired of working on Slime Keep. So I just stopped working on it and just started editing the next devlog, which is that rich text devlog. And
Yep.
so I kind of use devlogs and other stuff and just try to keep it balanced, I guess.
It sounds like you kind of naturally stumbled into what I think, and I don't have any like articles to cite for this or anything, but I've read that like human beings can only actually stay at like 100% like mental capacity, like focusing on something really, really deep. I think it's for 2 hours. I'm not totally positive on that, but it's around that level of time where after you've been working for that amount of time, like really, I mean like you're on your computer, you're programming, you're like in a flow state, you're deep into it. After about 2 hours, your mental capacity to be able to hold on to stuff just really starts to slip away, and that's the point where you need to take a break. And this is something that I've actually read in like scientific articles. So it sounds like you kind of stumbled into that naturally, and it's just, and I'm just validating what you're saying, because I have found, particularly with finding bugs in my game, if I've had a really long day and I'm working like into the evening kind of stuff, and I can sometimes spend like, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours looking for a bug to no avail, right? Like I can't figure it out. But then I decide, you know what, I need to call it a night. So I sleep, and then in the morning I can find it in like 45 seconds, like literally.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, it's weird because it sounds counterintuitive to take a break from something,
Yeah.
but I mean, in reality, it's so much better to take a break. Like, I think you could have someone, work 8 hours straight, and they would make less, progress on something than someone who works as little as 4 hours, but between every hour or so, they take, a 30-minute break or so. Even though they're working half the time, I genuinely think that they would get, considerably more done, or just as much or more done, which I think is quite an interesting thing to think about.
It is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just want to ask, like, for people that are just starting out as indie game developers, do you have any advice that you would give them? Because, you're coming from a really great place, and you're such a young guy. So you've got like, like And that's not a qualifier in and of itself, right? But it's just like you're at a point where a lot of people would want to be at. And a lot of people that I've heard say, oh, if you're going to start game development, start when you're young, right? So it makes me really happy to be able to talk to someone like you, where like, yeah, you are a young guy, you've got a YouTube channel, you've got this game, like things are going really, really well for you. And that just makes me so happy to see. So for people that are starting out and they kind of want to get to where you're at with Slime Keep, or get to where you're at with your YouTube channel, or both, like what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I can think of a few things. I mean, there's already been so much said already, like start small and all that kind of stuff. But I guess just personally, something I guess to think about is, you know, we're don't I guess try to idolize people because people might look up to me and be like, man, he's such a good game developer. But in reality, I mean, I don't think I'm the best game dev or programmer out there. And you just have to think that you can always improve and make awesome stuff yourself, whatever you're working on. And don't think that I'm just, some programming wizard, because I started out, and when I was starting out, it was not I really didn't like programming. I started out doing game development, and I mean, it wasn't too much fun. I was like, this is because the hardest part for me was really just learning the basics, and it was extremely hard for me to just get the foundations of Unity so I could actually make my stuff. And so that part, if you're struggling in that area, just know, I mean, eventually, you just have to keep at it. And that part is not fun, and you might, have trouble with it, but that's normal. And I'm sure a bunch of other people you see that are really good programmers now also might have, had tons of trouble with just getting in the hang of things and just learning the literal core basics. So that's something I think about. And then also, I guess for me personally, I've just learned throughout Slime Keep is to try to have a plan with your games. And I kind of touched on this on my 2-year Slime Keep development video where it was kind of an overview. But in reality, I mean, when I was starting out, I had no clue what Slime Keep, what I was gonna be, or how the game was really gonna function. And so I literally started out, the game just by making small tweaks, like, oh, there should be screen shake here, and just tiny stuff. And
Yep.
I never really had. I mean, thankfully, the game I think has morphed into a product that I'm happy with, but it was very stressful for me at times because I didn't really know what I was gonna do with the game. I mean, I knew I was making a roguelike, but I really didn't have a lot of the game planned out. And so I think I found really, really important because, I mean, a lot of the stuff I was doing, I kind of just am making up along the way. And so just having a plan, I think, is also just something really, really important to know, like what you're going to do and what the game is going to be like. In certain systems, just have that, figured out, or you don't have to have everything fully figured out, before you start a game, but at least have a solid idea.
That's awesome. I wrote something down again that you said. I wrote down, don't idolize people, because I've given that advice out myself, and I feel like that's a super important thing for people to take away for like their own like personal, how they feel about themselves when they go into this. Because if you idolize somebody, right, you're putting them up on this pedestal. And so if you've got someone else that you aspire to be like, but you've got them up on this pedestal, then if they're up here, then you've got to be down here, right? I know you can't.
Yeah.
I don't think you can see me, but you've got your hand down here. And so if you're putting yourself below others, then like it's going to affect your confidence. It's going to affect your mindset. And I think if you don't really believe in yourself, which idolizing people, I know it's not really that far of a stretch to go from idolizing people to feeling like, well, I can't do it because I'm down here and they're up there, right? It's this kind of like weird, it can make it very difficult for people, I think. I'm just curious to see if you agree with me a little bit on that.
No, definitely. Because I mean, oftentimes if you idolize people, it definitely is going to affect your confidence, because you think like they have something that I don't have and I can't ever have. But I mean, in reality, a lot of the times, something that is the big differentiator is just that this person has worked on this thing for a while. I mean, for me, Slime Keep, someone might look at me and it's like, man, that's so cool. I mean, it's really just that I've been able to keep at it for a while. And you can be where I am. It's not that I'm a genius programmer and that's how I got here. I'm definitely not, and I'm probably not as good as you think I am. But just know that a lot of the people that you might idolize or think are successful and have kind of made it they really just got there by spending time learning something and just being really dedicated to it. And that's the difference, is that they just kind of put in that work to get there. And you can too if you just spend the time working at it and that kind of stuff.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to ask, before we wrap up, is there any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience before we wrap this up?
Nothing too much. Just wish list sign keep if you want. Help me get to that number one spot if you want to. But I think you covered all the bases pretty well here, and it's a good question. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to kind of spew my whole entire story, I guess.
No, you're welcome, man. Like, honestly, I want to genuinely thank you so very much for agreeing to this. And I want to stress what you just said very, very much to everyone who's listening. Look up Slime Keep. It's spelled just how it sounds on Steam. It's like, I've been following the development of this game, on and off for quite a long time now, and it's like really shaping up to be a really interesting looking and really special game. And it's one of the most wish-listed games on Steam for a reason. So definitely go check it out. Go to the Steam page, wish list it. Check out BenBonk's YouTube channel. That's BenBonk, BenBonk. And I spelled that right?
Yep,
I've got it written up here. But all right, man. Thank you so very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, man. Take care.
No problem. Yeah, thank you.
Bye. I want to give a very special thank you to all of our Hall of Fame patrons: Jakob Yondok, Zonder Kessler, Darren Preen, Throbbing Wind, Fontaine Waite, Couch, Christopher Nichols, and Brainwaves to Binary, as well as our early access patrons: Zyoma, Ken Waite, Mason Crow, Mr. D, Audio Games, Jan, Donnie Briggs, Alexander Prestis, Darren Cook, Godsworn, Abdulaziz, Hamad Alanazi, Bill Guo, Alone on Mars, Code Jutsu, Merler, Ayush Sharma, and Jarrett Whitehead. If you choose to support us on Patreon, you can get access to all of our YouTube videos, monthly alpha builds, and more.